we have a very interesting panel of some very senior people who need absolutely no introduction, but I'll just go through them quickly. We have Mr. B.V. Rao from Governance Now, who is at the end of the table. Mr. Sukumar, editor of Mint. Mr. Cherian, who is from Perfect Relations. And Mr. Bhattacharya from the editor of Business Standard. And today, this afternoon, we're going to touch on a topic which I think touches on everyone, whether you're a journalist or if you're in communications, but generally, but we're going to look at the whole issue of ethical challenges, specifically in business journalism, though that some of the things that we talk about probably could apply to a wider range of issues. And it's a very topical issue. It's an issue that people talk about a lot. It's a sensitive issue, so it's a tricky one, but I think a very important one. And I know there's quite a bit of interest in hearing what people have to think, and I'm sure everyone has an opinion or two on what's the best way to proceed, because even when it comes to ethics, I guess whose ethics are we talking about? Are my ethics your ethics? Are there such a thing as a global ethics, or business journalism ethics being different from ethics in another area of the journalistic field? So to begin, what I'd like to do is to ask our distinguished panelists to speak maybe about 5 minutes about what they think are the challenges in business journalism. I should point out that part of the interesting mix is that we have two people who actually are business journalists, so they are known for their reporting, and they're practicing ethical business journalists. And then we have two other panelists who are in one way or the other related to the issue of ethics in the profession. So without further ado, I'd like to ask, would you mind starting? And just about 5 minutes, and what challenges you see in business journalism from an ethical point of view.
And of course, one correction is that Dilip used to be a
journalist,
very respected business editor. Yes. At one point in time before he went over to the dark side.
Well, was it the dark side? The brighter side?
Depends on what he's looking at.
Okay, thank you for inviting me to this session. Well, let me start by saying that perhaps there's something wrong in the way you have framed the issue. Because the way I look at it is ethical challenges in business journalism. I don't see them as challenges. To me, ethics in business journalism is part and parcel of business journalism. So somehow I cannot understand the manner in which it is being seen as if it is posing a challenge. Now, if it is posing a challenge, then it is a reflection of the system, the way we function, the way we are organized, the way we do our reporting. So that's the primary point I would like to make, that ethics is part and parcel of business journalism or anything that you do. So the very fact that we are discussing here, something called ethical challenges, itself is a reflection of the reality, which is not really what it ought to be. That's point number one. Point number two, what is really ethics? If you want to say that ethics is what people believe, feel they're right or wrong, is that ethics? I really don't know. If somebody in a situation of extreme poverty goes to a landlord and says, I want money and I want to pay him at rate of interest, which is much more than what it ought to be, and the landlord saves him from many other complications in life, is the landlord unethical? Although he has charged him usurious rates of interest. So it is not something which is really actually what you feel is right, what is wrong. That is not ethics. So let me eliminate ethics. Second, is it part of a religious belief? No, it's not. Ethics is not really part of a religious belief. I can tell you in India, there's the Brahmins in Bengal and Kashmir eat meat, but the same Brahmin in North India or South India will not even go anywhere near that. So who is ethical? So it is not even religious belief then. Now, is ethics defined by law? I don't know whether it is defined by law either. So it goes beyond law most probably. There was a situation when slavery was part of law, when there was a situation of untouchability was part of law, sati was part of law. So even apartheid was not covered by ethics. So it is not even law then. So if you eliminate all this, what is then ethics really all about that we're talking about in business journalism? Are we talking about then some well-founded standards of what is right and what is wrong? Are we talking about fairness? Are you talking about honesty? Are you talking about integrity? Now, the larger point I'm trying to make is this, that ethics is not to be confused with what is a rule or what is a rule-based system. Ethics is an organizational ethos or an individual way of functioning, which is perhaps your call. And that call determines the overall character or the religion, not in the religion sense of the person or the organization. And I think it's very important to make that distinction, because a code of conduct is not to be necessarily to be confused with ethics. And if newspapers or business journalists or any journalist is facing the challenges from ethics, it is not because there are no codes of conduct. There are codes of conduct, but the ethical challenges are not arising out of just not following the code of conduct, but the manner in which you conduct yourself or you do your business. I will just stop after just touching upon three key issues that, from my own experience, which tells me what to make of ethics for a journalist. Why business journalist? I think ethics is as important to a non-business journalist. One is a keen sense of making disclosures, which comes from transparency. Number two is recognition of conflict. When I say disclosure, it also means if you are writing about your wife's school, then I think you should make a disclosure. So that's disclosure. Or I'm not even going into writing about stocks in which you hold. I mean, that's going beyond it. I mean, as simple as that anything that needs to be disclosed to make sure that your interests are on public display, that is disclosure. Similarly, conflict of interest. Conflict of interest can arise from a variety of issues, whether you are owned by a group of business houses or not. I mean, organizationally or individually, those conflicts of interest are in play at every point. So that is another area of ethics, which is not really defined by any code of conduct or rule, really. And the third thing, to my mind, is sense of fairness, which goes beyond the sense of correctness. And a simple example which I always give is that when you know that it is correct and you know that it is not fair, there is a distinction that you make yourself, and you say, no, I think I should conduct myself in that manner. The point I'm making is this, that ethics is largely a subject of discretion. It will be perhaps futile to define it in terms of a code, and that is the biggest challenge. And if ethical challenge becomes a difficult challenge today, it is because of this lack of definitiveness about this issue of ethics. I know I have said something which will provoke many of you and my co-panel members, so which is why I have deliberately tried to raise these issues, and I will hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cherian, we'd like to share your thoughts on the issue.
Thank you. I'll also keep my initial comments brief because I can guess that this is going to be a most interesting dialogue, and hopefully we will carry the theme to the level which is operationally useful to all of you. I think that the issue of ethics and the way it needs to be defined, as AKB has very correctly put it, involves at the very core the individual and the values and the sense of correctness and the sense of justice, as it were, all big and complex words to understand, but essentially all of us understand what they mean in terms of our real life. And I think that should be the core. As you begin to put flesh around that core, there are interesting thematics which emerge. One is the environment in which you're functioning, the competitive environment, the ownership environment, and the environment about which you're reporting. So these are things which complicate the core of a simple, ethical, fair system which you think you may be working with. The third aspect of the third sort of cover on this is the subject on which you're reporting. Though Mr. Bhattacharya did say that it doesn't matter whether you're reporting on business as opposed to reporting on something else, and it ought to be broadly the same kind of set of values that you ought to work with. I think that till recent times, the world of business journalism was fraught with many more levels of complication: ownership of shares, the ownership of the business, etc. But in the last 5 years of doing political PR, I've seen that even that platform, in a sense, has vanished. And today the political journalist is as prone to all kinds of pressures and the overlay of much more by way of non-ethical inducements than ever used to be the case. So in a sense, that fine distinction has also vanished, and they're all on the same platform today. So where do you go, and how do you sort of ensure that there is a sense of ethics as opposed to this code of conduct? For my sins of the past of having been either a business journalist or an owner of various things, I also sit on 2 boards which are supposed to have a kind of moral blueprint for how business journalism, the business of advertising, all of it is conducted. I sit on the censor board and I sit on the Advertising Standards Council. So 2 completely different ends of the spectrum. In one, the heavy hand of government deciding what you should see, which dirty picture is entitled for public viewing. And at the other side, completely industry-owned and governed, what is the word for it? Self-regulatory body. Okay? So, which is also trying to induce the sense of fair play between extremely aggressive players in the area of marketing, advertising, business, journalism, whatever it is. So it gives me a ringside view as to how all this works in real terms. As editors, all 3 of the gentlemen here recognize this in the pieces they have to put through, in the themes they have to work. But in the world of business, there is, to my mind, sadly, whether it is in the world of global business or in the world of domestically owned business, and again there the distinctions are vanishing, all of this is in a sense under threat. Okay? The pressures of the marketplace are putting it under threat. I also sit on the boards of some management schools which teach governance, which teach corporate ethics, which teach finer moral standards. And now I'm recognizing that the smart management professors are also changing their theme song. They are saying that good governance is important because the chances of getting found out are more. Okay? So it's not about your own internal gyroscope, as it were, but it's about what's the cost you pay. And I think that is where I want to conclude. In the brave new world of the future, actually, much of what you think you might get away with, much of what you think you can skirt on the edge of ethics, gets caught out. Because a whole new world of social media, Wikipedia, WikiLeaks, etc., is intervening in the spaces which we thought were private. They go beyond the veil. So every kind of conceivable corporate veil there is being pierced and is actually being reduced to pretty much shattered to tatters at the moment. Okay, so the space is vanishing. So we might see, if all goes well, a gradual return to some core moral values. How will they be defined? I don't know yet. But I do think that the space to hide, which had increased over a period of time, the pressure to hide had increased over a period of time, is now, for the first time, I'm optimistic that you're seeing a swing back, and you will see more and more people looking through these curtains and saying, this is not what you said 2 years ago. How come you've changed your view now? This is not what you reported in page 17. This is what you reported on page 1. So these questions, whether it's a television program, whether it's an internet program, is going to come through and the light will shine. So I'm ending on what I would call a more optimistic note, saying tomorrow may possibly be better. Thank you.
Yeah. I sort of expected this to be a panel discussion, so I didn't really come with an opening address prepared. But because I disagree strongly with a lot of things that AKB and Dilip said, I have something to speak about. Right? Both these gentlemen belong to a generation which is at least one generation ahead of mine. I think it's closer to 2, but probably 1. We'll leave it at 1. And so they believe in the inherent goodness of people and morals and values and all that, which is fine. You know, all of us are honest. I know it, right? You know it. You can't take these for granted, right? So if we were to leave our newspaper functions or our newsroom functions to the inherent goodness of every individual in this newsroom, in that newsroom, as AKB was suggesting. Yeah, but no, that's more or less where it was leading up to. Then you know, it'd be a very, very shabby newsroom, and which is why you need to have rules. You need to have a code. What does your code need to be? It needs to be all-encompassing, because it cannot be all-encompassing by the very nature of the medium. It has to be constantly evolving. You need to look at every possible situation that a reporter could possibly face and tell that person, reporter / editor / whoever else works in your newsroom, tell them how to deal with it. 3, needs to be enforced. And 4, needs to be communicated, because the people who are affected by your code are the subjects whom you're writing about, right? So I pretty much run the Mint newsroom on the basis of this code of conduct. We've had this code of conduct for 5 years. It's undergone 4 iterations. It will probably undergo a 5th. You have to constantly evolve. The last big iteration it underwent was around 2 years ago, when this whole animal called social media took off. And I was very, very happy to note that BBC modified its own code of conduct around the same time that we did, to include social media in it. We didn't borrow from theirs, they didn't borrow from ours. You know, it's fairly independent, so their rules are a little different from ours. So you need to have a code, because without a code, how will a reporter know how to act? And there are fundamental differences even in journalistic terms, right? Because all of you are journalists. How many of you are reporters? What does off the record mean? Not to be published. Do you know how many people in this country believe it means not to be attributed? Right? So, if something is off the record, you cannot publish it. Now, are you going to leave it to the inherent understanding or the inherent goodness of people to deal with it? Or are you going to put it down in a document which is shared widely with your reporters and your editors, so that they know what needs to be done? Ownership of shares. AKB spoke about disclosure. I'm sorry, but until 5 years ago, I haven't seen a single instance of disclosure in Indian media. Right? It's a trend that my newspaper started. I don't say this to boast, but it said disclosure about who's related to whom, which company is promoted to what, and various other things. And there are lots of newspapers that still don't do it, right? One of our largest rivals, Economic Times, has a reporter who covers art, who covers the exhibition of the chairperson's daughter, and you don't disclose that in the story. I don't know what kind of disclosure you're talking about, right? So you can't take these for granted. You'll have to set these down in stone and enforce them. So that's the first thing. What is ethics? Ethics is a system of moral principles. We cannot make people good or bad. We cannot change the values that they've been brought up with, which is, a function of various things, the environment they grew up in, parenting, all those things. But what I can influence and will influence is their behavior on the job, which is what a code is meant for. So we can all add to the nebulousness around this word ethics and say, like, just having a code is not going to solve the problem, but having a code which is zero tolerance. I've fired 4 people so far for violating the code of conduct after proper procedure, of course. But having a code goes a step towards that. Will it make these people good? No, I don't know. And I don't care. I don't care whether they are nice to animals or cruel to animals. I'm not worried about that. All I'm worried about is, are they doing their jobs honestly? Because that is what ethics is about at the professional level. 2, AKB said there are no challenges, right? He said it's all very clear. It's all very clear, but there are a huge number of challenges. And Dilip mentioned this. 1, there are challenges from the marketing side, right? Like, my marketing department is there. It's a necessary evil and more evil than necessary, right? So those guys are there and they will sell their souls and mine to the system if it helps them meet their target. So that challenge is there. The second challenge that you have is the fact that Indian companies are not used to objective coverage by anyone, because they are used to friendly coverage by people. So, they will call you up and ask you, why are you writing this? Why are you not writing this? 3, everyone in this country knows everyone else once you reach a certain level. So you'd be surprised at the number of calls I get from people who say, and I know your chairperson very well. So, to which my usual stock reply is, then you're fortunate because I don't know her at all. So there are these challenges, and these are daily challenges. It's not as if you encounter them once in a while. Every time you want to do a tough story, you get these calls, you get various things. 4, it is very, very difficult to separate ethics from the ability of an organization or the courage of an organization to stand up for what is right. And I don't mean this in a crusading term. If you ensure that your people follow basic rules while reporting, you will be sure that your stories are right. If your stories are right, if someone calls you up and threatens you, saying like, we are going to file a suit against you, you can pretty much say, be my guest. And the example I'd like to give in this case is the largest company in this country, which is Reliance Industries Limited. There was a SEBI investigation into it, insider trading. Mint broke the story. Several other newspapers followed suit. Several other business newspapers followed suit. The company threatened everyone. All the other business newspapers ran retractions on page 1. We said, no way, because we were sure of our sourcing, right? And sure enough, 2 years later, it turns out that there is an investigation going on, and now everyone is publicly speaking of a consent process, both the company and SEBI and everyone else. So if you don't ensure that you follow a certain code, you will never be able to stand up for what is right. Final thing. At the end of the day, the most important thing in ethical journalism is to never forget the fact that it's just a job, right? Because that's what it is. It is just a job. It is not a crusade. So every time I see the term crusading journalist, I wince. Because people who crusade are activists. They're not journalists. And running a crusade is the easiest way to lose your objectivity. So again, your code is something that ensures that you never lose your objectivity. You know, that you continue to report against the company which has filed a case against you as objectively as you would report against a company whose CEO smiles at you, right? So that's all I have to say.
Ethics. It's easy to get confused about ethics, but to me, ethics is simple. Ethics is the kind of person you decide you want to be. But in the world we live in especially in the world of journalism and in the world of business journalism, it is of no consequence what you decide to be or how you want to behave. That is where I agree with Sukumar. The organizational ethics is what is important. The organizations we work for need ethics. There are any number of big media houses. You look at how they operate. The Times of India group, for example, has certain rules, certain principles, certain ethics. The Hindustan Times has one. Within the Hindustan Times group, Sukumar's paper has a completely different set of ethics, which it follows to the T, and I have often written about and applauded him for that. The only newspaper in this country that I have come across, which actually put a page one, was it a notice, pointer, saying that on falana pages inside, you will see a supplement about, I forget who the advertiser was. This is a completely marketing effect. The editorial team has not participated in it. This must be treated as an advertorial. There is absolutely no room for ambiguity anywhere in it, right? So if you fix it there, then everything else falls in place. If the editor is willing to, I seriously thought that Sukumar would get into serious heat, under serious heat on this, right? But obviously he didn't, right? So somewhere, yeah, no, you continue there, so that's why, right? So if this description, if this idea of what you want to be is very clear, then everything else is easy. Otherwise, as AKB said, it can be so confusing. There can be different ethics can mean different things to different people. But when you set your standard, then there is no confusion. In Times of India, there is no confusion too, right? Right? Yeah, it's a good paper. But as I said, within the same organization, I don't see the same set of ethics applying to Hindustan Times though. Hindustan Times always quotes the edges or maybe sometimes gets directly into the core of advertorials, right? So what is important is what is the organization, or what do we stand as an organization, and that is not either me individually or he individually, or it's a set of people, it's the board, it's all kinds of things that dictate it. Why is it important that organizations have these codes and ethics and morals? Because we have heard this phrase for the last 10-15 years. We are a newspaper, we have to survive, this is a business. We are not in charity. Yeah, of course, we are not in charity. We all have to pay our the salaries and bills and all that. But what sets the business of journalism from any other business is the fact that we are basically doing everything on account of the people. Which business do you think has a freedom of expression guarantee in the Constitution? Derived, it's not a direct, but it's a derived right. Which business do you think has the right to walk straight into another business and ask questions of that business? Which business do you think has the right or the power to pull down or push up any other business in this country? Nobody except this business. And we do all this because of the power of the people, and the accountability is to the people. That is why we need ethics, because we have something in our hand that can cause either destruction or otherwise, right? So that is why we need, and unless organizations come in to this debate at the larger level, the INS level, or what are all the other boards, the broadcasters associations and others, we can keep talking about ethics and morals and others till the cows come home, and we would have not moved an inch. Yeah. So I'll end it there, and then we can take it into.
I just wanted to clarify myself. I did not ever say that code of conduct is not necessary. I think I've been misquoted there. I said code of conduct is necessary, but what is more important, let me complete. What is more important is ethics, and ethics should not be confused with code of conduct. That is number one. Number two, what I said was that ethics is an individual matter and code of conduct is an organizational matter which should be enforced on individuals. So these are the two things. I think there's some confusion there.
No, there's no confusion at all. I think you've misunderstood me. As a newsroom, if you have to perform ethically, the only thing you can use to perform ethically and function ethically is a code of conduct. So it is the only thing that can cause it, because unless there is a larger organizational soul of the newsroom which is inherently good, it will never be there. So this is the only thing that can ensure that. If you don't have this, then it's all very easy to speak of ethics and of how it's different from code of conduct, but you can't have that ethical behavior.
My sense is that code of conduct will take you up to a point, but ethics is, I think, is much more than that. That's my point.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So code of conduct is a primary basic firmament, and if you don't have ethics is not code of conduct. Code of conduct leads to ethical behavior, but ethics in itself is much larger than a code of conduct set of rules.
Yeah, but,
which is very important.
Yeah, you're speaking of an evolved state which I have not seen in any newsroom, right? It's an evolved state which I don't think any newsroom in this country can claim that it is in that evolved state. And in the absence of that, the only thing that you can have are the hygiene factors.
Okay, well, very interesting discussion so far. And as we continue, just wondering if the folks in the audience have any questions with respect to challenges, and whether you yourselves have faced some challenges with respect to dealing with ethical issues that you'd like to pose to members of the panel. And I saw one hand at the back.
Yeah, well, this is not really a challenge, but I wanted to ask Sukumar, who really pens down these ethics, like this code of conduct that you're talking about?
And which also brings me back to something that I always keep saying: editors need to edit, right? That's the fundamental reason why you have editors. Editors should not be seen in TV studios, they should edit.
And to just supplement that point, Sukumar asked me whether I read the code as far as lobbyists are concerned. Disclosure here, I don't actually work very closely with media. That's one of the ethics that I follow. Because I spend time on media myself, I have teams which do that, and they're supposed to follow those codes and make sure that those work. Which I think brings me to the other related issue which I wanted to just throw in, is that, when you live in an era where there are codes of conduct which are well laid out, it also becomes easier for all kinds of players in the system to understand what is their prescribed norms of behavior. When it's all fuzzy, then there's enough room for non-ethical players to actually win. So delineated rules makes everybody actually smarter, and it's actually a tougher game, and most people enjoy that if there's a competitive game.
And I have a question for the panel. Speaking of rules for everyone as opposed to rules for some and not for others, and an area of fuzziness.
Seriously, self-regulation has a very convenient problem because everybody is sitting on for example, in advertising, by the time you censure the advertiser, the campaign's over and it's 3 months past that date by the time the committee is met and will happily promise and withdraw it instantly because the time is over. But look at, for example, professional bodies. Except for the grand Satyam case, for example, the Chartered Accountants body is pretty powerful, and people are quite terrified of being found in violation of it, and it's taken quite seriously. The lawyers have, for example, seriously kept out almost any kind of, except that ethics is not one of the big issues that they deal with, but together they've managed to have some kind of a body. But I think journalism is well past that date. I don't think you're not going to get into that space anymore. So, government, worst case scenario. But for my money, I would say that it's probably better that each organization declare its ethical format clearly, and over a period of time, both advertisers and readers, viewers, users of material will tend to aggregate, hopefully, at a faster pace today than was possible yesterday. And that's where my hope still sort of, to some extent, still exists.
Well, I
How do you, as a PR person, advise your team members, and how you, as a do you mean unethical or do you mean unprofessional? No, unethical and it's being unethical is also part of being unprofessional, or probably if you treat both of them separately. So my question is, in a certain situation like this, I don't know has it ever happened, but if there is a certain situation like this, or if you just being a
Let me try and take first shot at that. First, let me say that I'm not able to recollect personally a situation of this kind where we've had a big standoff, as it were. Most of the time in the PR industry, to the extent that I know and I practice, we are able to indicate to a journalist that, look, there's a story here, you need to go and talk to so and so, and this is what our view on it is, and this is what our take is. So far, we've been very blessed and lucky that we've got away with saying what our side of the story is. There have been temptations, and there have been many clients who have pushed us to saying, go and do a kill on somebody else. We found that it doesn't work well for us. Either that Bobby and I, who run the company, are not comfortable with that, and therefore our managers over a period of time, our CEOs have taken that view. So what we try and do is do the stories we want to get done. Where we've had an issue with journalists is where, for example, or a particular business or a business paper or a magazine is where they may carry a story which we feel has not had our viewpoint at all. There we are very aggressive about raising it up to the level of editor, and most times I must say that we've had extremely good traction with editors. We've very rarely had to go to owners. So as a matter of course, we don't go beyond the editor, and it's worked very well for us so far. Again, having said that, on one occasion we've not authorized, the word, advised our client to sue. And it's been, in the last 25 years of being in the business of public relations, I think probably on 3 occasions we've given a client advice to sue, where we felt that this is intractable. And on one occasion, it's been a big sue, and it's actually worked very well for the client. We not only consider such cases quite seriously, this sometimes can be, if you get down that road, it can be a serious volume of business. It can be a serious volume of business. So you have to decide what kind of company you want to be. That's all. Once you take that call, then over a period of time, it's a bit like dead skin. It drops off. People don't come back to you with that kind of problem. So you've got to decide what kind of company you want to be. And we've been very, as I said, 25 years of being in the business has taught us some pretty interesting ground rules. And we found that we've managed to keep our heads above water. We've not sort of aggrandized ourselves in the way that maybe was possible if you went down another route, but we're quite happy doing this, very comfortable.
And I'm not sure if we have all the answers. I think this debate will continue, but I think we all have a better idea of some of the options that we can consider going forward dealing with this issue of ethics. So thank you very much, all of you, for sparing time with